I watched my daughter-in-law smile her sweetest and most innocent smile as my son handed over $60,000 of his hard-earned savings to pay off her secret debts. She thought she was so incredibly clever. She was planning to run the very second that check cleared the bank. She had no idea I already knew absolutely everything. I threw her out before she could completely destroy his life. But when I slammed the heavy oak front door in her face, a cold realization hit me. She was not leaving alone. The adrenaline was still shaking through my hands as I dragged her heavy designer suitcase across the hardwood floor and heaved it right onto the front porch. I am 62 years old, and after 30 years working as a loan officer at a major bank, I know a bad investment when I see one. But Chloe was worse than a bad investment. She was a predator disguised as a helpless victim. My son Marcus is 34 years old. He built his own logistics business from the ground up through pure sweat late nights and sheer determination. He has always been my absolute pride and joy. He is a good man with a heart entirely too big for his own good. He truly believed he was doing the noble thing by rescuing his wife from a crushing financial crisis. She swore was placed on her before they even met. I stood there in the quiet hallway, trying to steady my breathing, listening to the sound of her tires screeching out of the driveway. The absolute audacity of that woman made my blood run hot. Just a few hours earlier, she was sitting at my kitchen island sipping her herbal tea and weeping softly into a tissue. She had this manipulative way of looking at Marcus with wide-eyed, fearful eyes that made him want to fix everything for her immediately. And he did. He signed over the safety net that took him a decade to build, but my instincts had been screaming at me for weeks. You do not spend decades analyzing financial fraud and studying human behavior without learning exactly how to spot a liar. I noticed the small glaring inconsistencies in her daily stories. I saw the way she quickly shoved bank statements into her expensive purse the moment I walked into the room. I heard the hushed, urgent phone calls she took out in the freezing garage late at night. I knew she was hiding something massive, and the anger I felt in my chest right now was nothing compared to the fear that had been gripping me all week. I had to protect my boy, even if it meant stepping in and breaking his heart first. I did not raise my son to be a victim. When my husband passed away, suddenly Marcus was only 4 years old. Overnight, my entire world shattered, leaving me with a mountain of medical debt and a terrified little boy looking up at me for answers. I swallowed my grief, put on my best interview suit, and walked into the bank to secure a position as a junior loan officer. For the next 2 decades, my life was a relentless cycle of early mornings, late shifts, and extreme budgeting. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late at night, long after Marcus was asleep, sorting through a pile of bills under the dim overhead light. I would count every single penny, eating nothing but toast for dinner on some nights, just so I could afford to buy him a new pair of shoes for the school year. I sacrificed my own social life, my sleep and my youth, to ensure he never felt the crushing weight of poverty. Marcus saw those sacrifices. He grew up watching me work myself to the bone, and it instilled in him a work ethic that was truly unmatched. We were a team, just the 2 of us against the world. He promised me back then that one day he would take care of me, and he kept that promise. He built a thriving business, bought a beautiful home, and became a man of deep integrity and kindness. Every milestone he achieved from his college graduation to the grand opening of his logistics company felt like a shared victory. I poured every ounce of my strength into molding him into a resilient, compassionate man. Our bond is unbreakable, built on decades of mutual survival and profound love. Seeing him now so accomplished yet so incredibly vulnerable tears me apart inside. He has a soft spot for people in trouble, because he remembers how hard we had it when he was young. He wants to be the provider, the protector, the man who fixes broken things. But that beautiful, generous spirit is exactly what made him the perfect target. It is agonizing to watch the empire he built with his own two hands be threatened by someone who never worked an honest day in her life. Then Chloe walked into his life. From the moment Marcus introduced us, she presented a flawlessly polished exterior. She was undeniably beautiful, always dressed in impeccably tailored clothes, with perfect hair and a bright, captivating smile. She was articulate, charming, and knew exactly what to say to make Marcus feel like the most important man in the room. He was utterly enchanted by her. But underneath all that polished perfection, my intuition sensed a deep, unsettling void. Her eyes never quite matched her warm smiles, and she had a habit of carefully studying the expensive things in my home before she ever looked at me. I tried to push my doubts aside, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother, reluctant to let go of her only child. But the financial emergencies began almost immediately after the wedding. At first, it was a sudden, unexpected medical bill for a distant aunt in another state. Chloe wept at our dinner table, claiming she had no one else to turn to. Marcus, wanting to be the hero, paid it without hesitation. A few months later, it was a mysterious legal fee regarding a car accident she claimed was not her fault. She said if she did not pay up, her wages would be garnished immediately. Again, my son opened his wallet, assuring me it was just a temporary string of bad luck. But the demands only grew larger and more desperate. Last month, the ultimate crisis arrived. Chloe confessed through dramatic sobs and trembling hands that she was drowning in a massive, crushing debt from before they were married. She claimed a former business partner had taken out fraudulent loans in her name, and the collectors were threatening to seize everything she owned. It was a perfectly orchestrated performance. Instead of demanding proof or suggesting they hire a financial investigator, Marcus stepped right up to the plate. He told her they were partners now, and her burdens were his burdens. He agreed to drain the $60,000 he had saved for their future children, just to give her a clean slate. He held her in his arms, whispering that everything would be okay, completely blind to the calculating glint in her eyes. He was willing to sacrifice his hard-earned security, the very foundation we worked so hard to build, just to dry her fake tears. She played his noble heart like an instrument, extracting his wealth piece by piece, while I sat back, watching the disaster unfold. The uneasy feeling in my gut refused to settle. After 30 years of reviewing loan applications and sniffing out financial inconsistencies, my mind is trained to look for the things people try the hardest to hide. The tension in our house began to simmer thick and heavy right under the surface. I started noticing the small, concrete details that simply did not add up. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and caught Chloe hastily shoving a thick bank statement to the bottom of the trash can, carefully covering it with damp coffee grounds. A woman terrified of aggressive debt collectors does not throw away official financial documents without shredding them first. Then came the hushed phone calls. Marcus was working long hours at the logistics center, and Chloe spent her evenings pacing in our freezing garage. I would stand by the laundry room door in the dark, listening to her lowered voice echoing off the concrete walls. She did not sound like a frightened victim pleading for more time. She sounded demanding, urgent, and strangely in control. I remember gripping the edge of the washing machine, my knuckles turning white as I realized the depths of her daily deception. The most glaring red flag of all was her sudden, obsessive impatience regarding Marcus and his money. My son had written the check for $60,000, a staggering amount he pulled directly from his hard-earned business reserves. Instead of expressing profound gratitude or relief, Chloe was completely fixated on the banking timeline. She asked him 3 times in one single morning when the funds would officially clear the account. She hovered closely over him while he checked his banking app, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping anxiously on the kitchen island. A person drowning in old debts is grateful for a lifeline no matter when it arrives. But Chloe was watching the clock like someone waiting for a getaway train. My protective instincts flared into a 5-alarm fire. I knew with absolute certainty that the tragic story she told my son was a carefully constructed lie. I just needed the solid proof to tear it down. The turning point arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Marcus had left early for a major client meeting, and Chloe announced she was going to a yoga class to clear her stressed mind. She left her heavy winter coat draped casually over the back of the dining room chair. As I gathered the morning laundry, I picked up the coat to hang it properly in the hall closet. That was when I felt the heavy, rectangular weight hidden deep in the inner lining pocket. I reached inside and pulled out an old, cracked smartphone. It was not the expensive new model Marcus had bought her for her birthday just last month. This phone was supposed to be deactivated, a useless relic from before they were married. But the screen lit up in my hand. It was powered on, completely unlocked, and buzzing with a brand new notification. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands began to tremble so violently, I nearly dropped the device on the hardwood floor. I took a deep, shaky breath, tapped the screen, and opened the message thread. The physical reaction was immediate. A cold, sinking dread settled deep into my stomach as I scrolled through weeks of text messages. The truth was laid bare right in front of my eyes in harsh, glowing letters. There were no debt collectors. There was no aggressive former business partner threatening her life. The person on the other end of these messages was an active accomplice. Chloe was casually discussing international exchange rates, wire transfer fees, and offshore banking laws. She was complaining bitterly about how long Marcus was taking to liquidate his business assets. I read a message she sent just the night before, bragging about how easily my son had fallen for her fake tears. She actually called him a gullible fool. The $60,000 was not going to any creditors. It was being funneled directly into a secret offshore account nestled safely in the Cayman Islands. She was systematically bleeding my son dry, stripping away his financial security while sleeping in his bed every single night. I felt a sudden wave of nausea wash over me, followed immediately by a white-hot, blinding rage. Every sacrifice I had made to give my son a stable life was being stolen by a woman who felt nothing but contempt for him. I had to force myself to keep breathing, to keep reading, even though every single word felt like a physical blow to my chest. The evidence was absolutely undeniable. It was not just a betrayal of his wallet, but a complete and total violation of his trusting heart. Standing there in the quiet hallway with the glowing screen in my hand, I quickly pieced together her exact timeline. The messages outlined a plan so cold and precise, it made my blood run freezing cold. Chloe was waiting for Marcus and his final $60,000 transfer to officially clear the bank on Friday at noon. She had a one-way, first-class flight booked for 2 o'clock that exact same afternoon. The confirmation itinerary was sitting right there in her inbox. She planned to have the funds secured, her designer bags packed, and be thousands of miles away before Marcus even finished his Friday afternoon staff meeting. She was going to leave him completely bankrupt, legally tied to her massive mess, and emotionally destroyed beyond repair. The sheer cruelty of it took my breath away. For a fleeting moment, I was just a heartbroken mother, devastated for the incredible pain my beautiful son was about to endure. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. I wanted to march out the front door, find her in town, and tear her apart with my bare hands. I wanted to call Marcus right then and there and demand he freeze all of his accounts immediately. But decades working in the banking industry had taught me one vital lesson. Panic is the absolute enemy of strategy. Screaming would not stop the bank transfer from going through. Confronting her now would only give her the perfect opportunity to lie her way out of it, or worse, manipulate Marcus into thinking I was a crazy, jealous mother trying to ruin his happy marriage. I could not risk him taking her side in a frantic moment of confusion. If I showed my hand too early, she would just find another way to steal his money and run in the middle of the night. My outrage was deeply justified, but raw anger was not going to protect my family. In that defining moment, my heartbreak hardened into solid steel. I shifted from a grieving mother to a cold, calculating protector. I carefully placed the phone back into her coat pocket, exactly how I found it. I wiped the angry tears from my face and smoothed down my shirt. She thought she had outsmarted a naive young businessman. She completely forgot she was dealing with a veteran loan officer who spent her entire life protecting her son. I needed a foolproof plan, and I had exactly 3 days to execute it. For the next 3 days, I wore a mask so heavy it felt like it was suffocating me. I forced my breathing to slow down, smoothed the fabric of my sweater, and walked back into the living room to greet my daughter-in-law with a warm, loving smile. The internal psychological conflict of playing the oblivious, supportive mother-in-law was an absolute torment. Every single time I looked at her perfectly painted face, all I could see was a cold parasite, actively draining the life and future out of my beautiful son. I had to watch her sit on my couch, sipping expensive herbal tea and pretending to read a home decor magazine, fully knowing she was meticulously plotting the complete destruction of our family. That Tuesday evening, I even went out of my way to prepare her absolute favorite dinner, a rich baked ziti with fresh garlic bread. I stood in my kitchen, furiously chopping onions and crushing tomatoes, channeling every single ounce of my seething rage into the meal preparation. When we finally sat down at the dining room table, I watched Chloe enthusiastically thank me and gently squeeze Marcus by the hand. She looked deeply into his exhausted eyes and told him how incredibly blessed she felt to be part of such a loving and supportive family. It took every single ounce of my seasoned willpower not to reach across the table and expose her right then and there. Instead, I forced a bright smile, nodded politely, and graciously offered her a second helping of pasta. But the absolute hardest part of this silent plan was keeping this massive, devastating secret from Marcus. My boy was walking around with the crushing weight of the world on his shoulders. He was working double shifts at his logistics center just to ensure his business could survive the massive financial hit he was taking to save his wife. I saw the dark circles forming under his tired eyes and the defeated slump of his strong shoulders. My natural instinct as a totally devoted mother was to pull him aside, show him the photographs I had secretly taken of those text messages, and end his profound misery immediately. I wanted to hug him and tell him it was all a lie, but I knew if I told him the truth before the trap was completely set, his immediate blinding rage would ruin absolutely everything. He would inevitably confront her, and she would simply deny it, frantically twist the narrative, or worse, drain whatever remaining funds she could access, and vanish into the night before we could legally stop her. I had to let him live in his painful delusion for just a little bit longer, so I could secure the legal leverage needed to save him permanently. I swallowed my intense maternal guilt, praying he would eventually forgive me, knowing that the temporary agony of my silence was the absolute only way to protect his entire future and his hard-earned legacy. While Chloe spent her days happily browsing online travel catalogs and pretending to run errands, I went directly to work. I did not spend 30 years in the banking industry without building a formidable network of incredibly smart, loyal colleagues. Early Wednesday morning, under the simple guise of going to a routine doctor appointment, I drove straight to the main branch of the bank, where Marcus held his primary business and personal accounts. I bypassed the front lobby completely and walked right into the private office of Diane, a senior fraud investigator, and a trusted friend I had mentored a decade ago. I sat across her polished mahogany desk and slid the printed photographs of Chloe's text messages and the offshore routing numbers across the smooth surface. Diane took one look at the sheer audacity of the scheme and immediately sprang into action. She utilized her advanced security clearance to trace the exact destination of the pending $60,000 transfer. What she found turned my simmering anger into absolute bone-chilling shock. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands was not just registered to Chloe, it was a joint account legally bound to a secondary name. When Diane printed the official account registry and handed it to me, my blood ran completely cold. I stared at the name of her secret accomplice, my hands trembling all over again. It was someone I knew intimately, someone deeply embedded inside our own family circle, which suddenly explained exactly how Chloe knew so much about Marcus and his private financial vulnerabilities. I asked Diane for copies of every single document. From the bank, I drove directly to the sleek downtown office of Mr. Sterling. A ruthless and highly effective family lawyer I had known for years, I laid out the entire mountain of undeniable evidence on his desk. Together, we crafted a completely airtight legal strategy. Using the explicit proof of intentional financial manipulation and international money laundering, Mr. Sterling filed an emergency injunction. We successfully placed a hard legal hold on all of Marcus's bank accounts under the strict guise of suspected wire fraud. The $60,000 check was completely frozen in the banking system. The beautiful part of a federal wire fraud investigation hold is that the account holder is not immediately notified until the internal review is processed, meaning Chloe would have absolutely no idea the money was stopped. The trap was flawlessly constructed, legally binding, and completely invisible. I walked out of that law office with a folder full of hard evidence and a heart full of cold, righteous determination. I had successfully gathered my powerful allies, locked down my son's entire financial portfolio, and discovered the sickening depth of the betrayal. All I had to do now was wait for the clock to run out on her pathetic little game. Friday morning finally arrived, bringing with it a thick, suffocating tension that hung heavily in the crisp morning air. I woke up long before the sun, getting dressed with the meticulous precision of a soldier preparing for a final battle. I drove over to my son's house just after 8 o'clock, uninvited, but completely determined. When I walked through the front door, the nervous energy radiating from Chloe was practically vibrating off the walls. She was dressed in a sleek, comfortable travel outfit, her hair pulled back, perfectly buzzing around the kitchen, with an excessive, almost manic level of fake pleasantry. She greeted me with a bright, tight smile that did not reach her calculating eyes, offering me a fresh cup of coffee with slightly shaking hands. I casually accepted the mug, taking a long sip as I glanced out the large kitchen window toward the driveway. I immediately noticed that the rear suspension of her luxury sedan was sitting noticeably lower than usual. She had already secretly packed her heavy designer bags and loaded them into the trunk while Marcus was in the shower. She was entirely ready to vanish without a trace. Marcus came downstairs a few minutes later, kissed her softly on the forehead, and grabbed his briefcase, completely unaware that he was kissing a ghost. He hugged me goodbye and left for his crucial Friday staff meeting. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the countdown to noon officially began. I moved slowly and deliberately, taking a seat at the heavy wooden kitchen island. I intentionally positioned my body directly between Chloe and the hallway leading to the front door and the garage. There was absolutely no way she was leaving this house without going straight through me. For the next 3 hours, I engaged her in a grueling game of psychological warfare. I sat there calmly sipping my coffee, asking her highly detailed, probing questions about her upcoming weekend plans and her fictional debt collectors. I watched the frantic panic slowly begin to build behind her fake smile as the hours ticked by. She constantly checked the digital clock on the stove, her foot tapping rapidly against the hardwood floor. By 11:30, she was practically pacing the length of the kitchen, clutching her expensive phone to her chest, desperately waiting for the bank notification that would signal her ultimate victory. She tried several times to excuse herself to run a quick errand, but I smoothly redirected the conversation, offering to ride along with her, or insisting she stay and keep me company. I remained perfectly planted on that tall bar stool, an immovable object, blocking her grand escape route. The air in the room grew incredibly dense, heavy with her unspoken desperation, and my silent, simmering anticipation. I watched the glowing red numbers on the stove slowly shift to 11:59. The trap was fully set, the exits were blocked, and she was about to walk right into a solid brick wall of justice. The digital clock on the stove silently flashed to exactly 12 noon. I watched Chloe stare down at the screen of her expensive phone, her manicured thumb hovering eagerly over the banking application. She refreshed the screen, a triumphant smile already forming on her glossy lips. But the smile vanished in an instant, her face drained of all color, replacing that arrogant smirk with a mask of pure, absolute panic. Instead of a notification confirming a massive $60,000 deposit, a stark red security alert popped up, declaring that all associated accounts were immediately frozen, pending a federal wire fraud investigation. She gasped, tapping the screen frantically as if hitting it harder would somehow change reality. I did not waste another second. I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out the thick manila folder I had been guarding for 3 days, and slapped it down onto the marble kitchen island. The sharp crack echoed through the silent house. I methodically spread out the printed photographs of her secret text messages and the highlighted offshore bank documents, arranging them like a deadly hand of poker. Chloe looked up at me, her eyes wide and terrified, completely unable to form a single word. My voice was ice-cold, firm, and entirely unyielding as I read her own cruel words back to her out loud. I exposed every single lie, every fake tear, and every manipulative scheme, leaving her absolutely nowhere to hide. Right at that exact moment, the heavy front door opened. Marcus had finished his morning staff meeting early and decided to come home for lunch to check on his deeply distressed wife. He walked into the kitchen freezing as he took in the scene of my icy fury, and Chloe shaking like a leaf. I did not soften my tone. I simply gathered the stack of undeniable evidence and handed it directly to my son. I watched the agonizing sequence of emotions flash across his handsome face. I saw the initial confusion, the deep, shattering heartbreak as he read her texts, calling him a gullible fool, and finally the glorious shift into absolute freezing clarity. He did not yell. He did not shed a single tear. He dropped the papers onto the floor, looked his wife dead in the eye, and told her to get out of his house immediately. The moment Marcus spoke those final unforgiving words, the terrified victim act vanished completely. Chloe stood up straight, brushing an invisible piece of lint off her designer travel outfit. The fake tears dried up instantly, replaced by a cruel, arrogant smirk that finally revealed the true monster hiding beneath her beautiful skin. She let out a dry, condescending laugh, kicking the scattered bank documents out of her way. She looked Marcus up and down with absolute disgust, telling him she never really wanted his pathetic life anyway. She proudly declared that she did not even need his $60,000 anymore, because she was leaving right now with a real man, someone who truly understood her worth and knew exactly how to treat a woman. She grabbed her purse, spun on her expensive heels, and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the picture frames rattled against the living room walls. Marcus stood there in stunned silence, the betrayal cutting him deeper than he could possibly express. But I did not comfort him just yet. I walked swiftly to the large bay window overlooking the front yard, pulling back the sheer curtain just enough to watch the final act of this tragedy unfold. A sleek black luxury sports utility vehicle slowly pulled up to the curb, its engine purring smoothly in the quiet suburban street. Chloe strutted down the driveway with her head held high, looking incredibly smug as she reached for the passenger door handle. The driver rolled down the tinted window, and the afternoon sun illuminated his face perfectly. It was Desmond. Desmond is Marcus's brother-in-law, a man legally married to my own daughter, Nia. The shock of seeing him sitting there would have broken an ordinary family. Desmond and Chloe had been having a secret, passionate affair for over a year. They had meticulously planned this entire financial drain together, using his intimate knowledge of Marcus and his business to craft the perfect debt collector story. They intended to steal my son's life savings, combine it with the money Desmond had secretly drained from Nia, and run away to a tropical island to start a brand new wealthy life together. Desmond had always played the supportive brother, coming to our Sunday dinners, drinking my son's expensive scotch and laughing at my jokes, all while plotting to rob us blind. He was the one who suggested Chloe look into offshore banking. Seeing him behind that steering wheel ready to drive away with my son's deceptive wife was a level of pure evil that went beyond simple greed. They had turned our family trust into a weapon against us. They were so incredibly confident in their flawless escape plan, waiting for Chloe to hop inside so they could drive off into the sunset and leave us drowning in their toxic wake. They thought they were the smartest people in the entire world, genuinely believing they had won the ultimate prize. To anyone else watching from the street, it looked like the villains had secured their absolute victory. They had broken my children's hearts and were about to drive away without facing a single consequence. But as I stood by that window with Marcus finally stepping up right beside me, a slow, deeply satisfied smile spread across my face. What Chloe and Desmond did not know was that when Diane, the bank investigator, handed me the offshore account registry 3 days ago, I did not just go to the ruthless family lawyer. The moment I saw Desmond's signature on that international bank document, I drove straight to my daughter's house. Nia is a brilliant, fiercely independent woman who inherited every single ounce of my fighting spirit. When I showed her the overwhelming proof of her husband's disgusting betrayal, she did not cry or collapse. She immediately went to war. Just as Chloe grabbed the door handle of the black vehicle, the loud grinding roar of a heavy diesel engine shattered the quiet neighborhood. A massive commercial tow truck turned the corner, flanked closely by 2 local police cruisers, with their blue and red lights flashing brightly in the midday sun. They boxed the vehicle in perfectly against the curb, completely trapping Desmond in the driver's seat. The passenger door of the tow truck swung open and out stepped my beautiful daughter, Nia. She looked absolutely radiant, dressed in a sharp business suit, holding a thick stack of legal documents. In just 3 days, Nia had quietly filed for an emergency divorce, legally frozen every single one of Desmond's personal and business assets, and secured a court order to immediately repossess the luxury vehicle, which was legally registered entirely in her name. The police officers ordered a screaming, frantic Desmond to step out of the car and hand over the keys. Chloe stood frozen on the sidewalk, completely surrounded by flashing lights, watching in absolute horror as the tow truck operator hooked up their getaway car and hoisted it into the air. Nia walked right up to them, handed Desmond the divorce papers, and turned her back without saying a single word. The absolute panic on their faces was a priceless reward for the agonizing days I spent playing the fool. They turned on each other, instantly screaming and pointing fingers right there on the neighborhood sidewalk as the police officers instructed them to vacate the area. They had tried to prey on the generous hearts of my children, mistaking our deep family love for foolish weakness. Now they had to face the brutal reality of the streets they belonged on. Chloe and Desmond were left standing on the concrete curb with absolutely nothing. There was no secret fortune, no luxury car, no exotic vacation, and no family left to manipulate. They were completely broke, entirely exposed, and totally alone. I reached out, gently squeezed my son's shoulder, and firmly locked the heavy front door, leaving them both on the outside forever. Family loyalty is the absolute foundation of a meaningful life, but it can also be the very thing a predator uses against you. As a mother, you spend decades building a safe haven for your children, and your intuition about who enters that sanctuary is never wrong. In our golden years, we naturally want to see the absolute best in people. We want to believe that love is always pure and intentions are always good. But we must never, under any circumstances, allow our genuine kindness to be mistaken for foolish weakness. A mother will always protect her young, no matter how old they get. Have you ever had to step in and protect your family from someone they deeply loved? I know how incredibly difficult that position can be, and I want to hear how you handled it. Tell me your personal story in the comments section below. Please let me know what state you are watching from today, and if you have been listening since the very beginning. Leave a heart emoji so I know you stayed right until the end. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of truth, justice, and family.